You did something stupid, and I believe you feel bad about it, and that's why you're all freaked out right now.
An innocent victim, snuffed out in the prime of her life.
And I said, you'll never believe it. I'm going into apartments looking for body parts. And it was horrible.
In my numerous years of law enforcement experience, I've never seen anything as shocking and as horrific as that in my...
This is your girlfriend.
I understand.
We found a body.
The truth will be revealed.
I think his problem was that he thought that he was smarter than we were.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and Macon, Georgia, a city known for its old manor homes, Southern rock and roll, and the prestigious Mercer University.
Mercer is Macon. It opened in 1823, so you're talking well over 200 years worth of history there. And it's known as being one of the top schools in the country.
At the entrance to Mercer's law school sits the
Law school in 1995 and saw the apartments, and they looked totally different from what you saw today. They were extremely run down. There were no balconies, no wrought iron, no patios, nothing. And the people, especially at the law school, were so excited when we bought them and did the first renovation. So we felt like that it was a good investment as long as the law school didn't move. We would be good.
The day that everything changed was June 30th, 2011.
My office received a phone call from some of our investigators stating that they were going up to the Barrister Hall apartments.
And the only thing that we knew was that a student had been missing and no one had heard from her within about a 4-day time frame.
The missing woman is 27-year-old law student Lauren Giddings.
Lauren Giddings had just graduated law school, came from a good family. She was preparing for a big move to Atlanta to live with her boyfriend, and she kind of had everything going for herself.
She was very vivacious. She just had a beautiful smile, and she loved her dog. When I picture her in my mind, that's the picture I have. It's her smiling and holding Butterbean.
Detectives Randy Gonzalez and Dan Shirley are assigned to the case.
When the case first were called out to the scene.
Her friends that she hangs out with said they haven't heard from her, which is unusual because of if they text her, she would normally text back to them at some point in time.
The first place they search is Lauren's apartment in Barrister's Hall.
Nothing looked to have been disturbed in any way. It appeared to be in its normal state. The only thing that we saw that was probably out of place was the fact that her purse, her cell phone, and her keys were still there in the apartment, and that her vehicle was still parked.
We're thinking, what's happened to her? You know, has she been abducted? Has something happened to her where she can't get help for herself?
Our crime scene investigators were called to the scene at which time they went into the apartment and they conducted the process of fingerprinting, looking for DNA, any type of evidence of what may have happened or anything that could tell us what happened. They used luminol, which it lights up blood under a black light. And when they sprayed her shower with that, it glowed like a Christmas tree. So we knew that something had happened in Lauren's apartment and left a large amount of blood behind. But we just didn't know what.
It's a troubling discovery, and it sends investigators out into the neighborhood in full force.
So we started canvassing the area. We were speaking with neighbors. At the time, there were only a few students from Mercer that was left on campus. Most people that are cooperative with us, they don't.
One of those concerned friends is Lauren's next-door neighbor, Stephen McDaniel, who is holding out hope that Lauren may still be alive.
Do you know anybody any enemies she might have had, somebody that might want to hurt her?
No, we don't know where she is. The only thing we can think is that maybe she went out running and someone snatched her.
The problem is, like Lauren's other neighbors, Stephen had his head down studying for the bar and didn't see or hear anything.
It does make it challenging because everyone's kind of preoccupied in the ordinary.
Then, investigators make a grisly discovery.
We were outside of Lauren's apartment complex in front of the building. It was kind of a windy day, a little bit, the wind was blowing, and we would smell an odor, like a foul odor every once in a while. And, was just trying to figure out, was what it was.
That smell led us to a trash can that was located outside of Lauren's apartment building. A black trash bag. Pulled out, and upon opening it, we located a torso inside those trash bags. In my numerous years of law enforcement experience, I have never seen anything as shocking and as horrific as that in my entire life. And unfortunately, we had a pretty good idea that it was Lauren's body.
Until then, they're treating Lauren's disappearance as a homicide.
I drove up, and the officer stopped me, and I said, I own this place. I need to get in here. So they let me through. And they had just, not 30 minutes before, found the torso and knew that we had a murder.
Based on the decomposition of the body, the medical examiner believes Lauren was likely killed between Saturday morning, June 25th, and Sunday evening, June.
Life, and then you're going to cut the body up. My thoughts are, what kind of person would do something like this? What kind of mindset does a person have that could treat another human being like this?
I was just in shock. This happens to other people. It doesn't happen in your neighborhood. It doesn't happen in your life.
To catch her killer, detectives will need to unravel the last 24 hours of Lauren Giddings' life.
Normally used to. We didn't know if it was a serial killer, someone traveling through town. We didn't know if it was a jilted lover. We didn't even, we had no idea what we were dealing with.
Quite honestly, I felt like it was somebody random and that we were never gonna know.
When we see dismemberment used in any case of murder, number one, it can have a strategic or an instrumental purpose, which means to conceal the body in smaller parts so that it's never found. There is actually a disorder called mutilophilia, which describes an offender's need to dismember and mutilate a body. So in other words, the murder is just step one, and it's what comes after that's really motivating them.
As you would imagine, with a crime of this nature, it just sent panic through the community. So we're trying to establish a suspect in this case as quickly as possible.
Detectives turn to Lauren's best friend, Ashley, hoping she can help fill in Lauren's whereabouts.
Stated that the last time she saw Lauren was on June the 24th. She and Lauren, along with some other friends, had went to a bar downtown.
One of those friends is a man named Joe.
Ashley said that Lauren and Joe had previously been in a relationship, but they had since broken it off.
She said Lauren's current boyfriend lives in Atlanta, but she and Joe remained friends.
Ashley described the night. I mean, it was just a normal night. They went down to blow off some steam from studying for the bar. Everybody seemed to be happy and having a good time. Back to Joe's apartment. They had some more drinks, and Lauren had spent the night at Joe's house.
It wasn't until 4 days later, when Ashley hadn't heard from Lauren, that she went over to her apartment to check on her.
No one's that surprised when they don't hear from Lauren for a number of days, and that's normal when you were in the midst of studying for the bar. It's everybody goes into their hole. They don't want to speak to the outside world.
Joe was immediately considered a possible suspect in the case. So in Joe's case, he wasn't the one that cut the relationship off. So there's a possibility there for quite possibly a jilted lover.
Detectives bring Joe down to the station to question him about the last time he saw Lauren. He confirms that she stayed the night at his house, but says she left alive and well the next morning at 8 a.m.
Joe's story makes him the last person, if that story is true, verified as seeing our victim when she was last alive. And while there's nothing on us thinking, is this story a play? Does he know more? Did something involving alcohol happen that night that he hasn't told people?
After finding what investigators believe is Lauren Giddings' dismembered torso in the trash can near the Barristers Hall apartments, suspicions are swirling around her ex-boyfriend, Joe.
The pressure was very, very intense. Like I said, due to the nature of the crime, needed to give them answers as quickly as possible. And Joe was the last person to see her alive.
During the interrogation, Joe remembers something. When Lauren left his apartment on Saturday morning, she said she might try to sneak into the local country club later on that afternoon.
So I went to the Healy Point Country Club, and she was actually captured on camera at the country club out by the pool and ordering a drink. The significance of the camera footage time Lauren was alive.
With Joe's story checking out, investigators shift their focus to Lauren's current boyfriend, David Vandiver.
David lived in Atlanta, an hour away. He was an established attorney out there.
He was about 20 years older than Lauren. We'd received information that David had planned on proposing to her, but he had also admitted that their relationship was a little rocky.
One time in passing, I don't know him that well, but I can tell you that the family wasn't enamored with David. I don't know if he just liked being single and didn't really want to commit. I don't know. But I know that at least her cousins were not happy with the relationship.
Detectives asked David to come down from Atlanta for questioning.
Being that he was her current boyfriend, we wanted to see what.
Detectives decide to keep their cards close to their chest while they suss David out.
David, I want to talk to you over here. What kind of relationship did y'all have? I mean, did she have other boyfriends?
Not that I'm aware of.
Let me see your hands for a minute.
Yes.
Was that a blister from golf?
That's the picture I sent her in a text. I got to, because the guy totally...
I'm asking you for your help.
Yes, sir.
This is your girlfriend.
I understand.
Okay. Because we can't find her. Okay?
Okay.
We found a body. We don't know if it's her or not.
David immediately claims he has an alibi, that he was in California golfing from 9:40 a.m. Friday morning until Monday morning at 6 a.m.
David said that he didn't speak to Lauren the entire time he was in California.
So you're telling me the whole time you were going to California, you didn't call her, check in with her in the house, wherever you live in Atlanta, and you didn't even call her and tell her you were home or anything?
No, I thought it was going to lead into a whole uncomfortable or awkward conversation about when are we going to get married and stuff like that. And I'm just like, my reaction to that is always just to kind of back away.
If you're in a relationship with someone, to me, it's kind of unusual that you don't talk with someone, you know, within 5 days. I mean, not even a phone call or text. You know, it's kind of one of those moments when you think, well.
People that she goes to school with says that y'all have had problems.
We've never had...
Recently.
No, I understand that, but... no.
Do you have a key to her apartment?
No, sir. No, sir.
David had a lot of motivation there. It very well could have been the fact that David, being the successful older man, and Lauren being the trophy, the fact that Lauren had spent the night with Joe a couple of days beforehand, we didn't have done harm to her.
You don't know anybody that might want to harm her?
No, sir.
Are you worried about that being her?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
While David appears suspicious, his alibi checks out. But before he's released, he reveals a disturbing piece of new information.
So in interviewing David, he did provide us with an email that Lauren had sent him saying that she thought that someone had possibly broken into her apartment.
David says he never responded to that email.
We know at least on Saturday.
Detectives begin to develop a new theory about Lauren's murder.
Well, that was significant in the fact that now if we have someone that's broken into our apartment, we also have a possible another suspect on the case. It is possible that someone was actually stalking her.
Detectives are exploring a theory that whoever killed Lauren Giddings in her apartment might...
Your thinking process is, did she let someone into her apartment? Was the apartment unlocked at the time and someone entered in? If no one forcibly broke in, how did they get in?
You can't break in through the doors. The doors are solid wood. They're set in a steel casing that is set into the concrete. So when the deadbolt goes through the steel casing, it goes into concrete. And unless you have an axe, you can't chop down that solid wood.
Either spare key or a master key. And well, we knew that one person that had a spare key to the apartment complex was the maintenance guy.
Detectives track down the maintenance man at the Barristers Hall Apartments, David Dorer.
He was a law student himself and very much dedicated to finishing his degree and practicing law.
He said that he didn't keep a close eye or have a lot of contact with the other.
Investigators ask him when he last saw Lauren.
He had informed us that he had been to Lauren's apartment a couple of weeks prior to us finding her body.
David Dorer says that he too was consumed with studying all week and therefore can't provide a solid alibi.
The fact that David, the building's maintenance man, had access to that room and to the saw and would have had access to all the residents' personal information, to keys to their units, could have wandered through the halls and around the grounds under the cover of darkness and had a lawful pretext.
Autopsy results come in, confirming that the torso does belong to Lauren Giddings and that she was likely dismembered with a hacksaw. Detectives go on the hunt for the murder weapon.
Then they asked to see in the laundry area. We let them into our lockout closet, and all of our, as I told you, all of our tools were hanging there. And there was a saw there, but it was one of about 3 saws that was on the peg. And they asked, are these your tools? And
but one of those saws isn't like the others. It shows positive traces for blood.
If I was a betting man and I found this hacksaw covered with what appeared to be human blood in the same building complex as Lauren, who was dismembered, I mean, I would be betting 100 to 1 that that was her blood on the saw.
At that point, it shoots the maintenance man up to the top of the list of being a possible suspect.
When they ask the maintenance man if the hacksaw belongs to his set of...
The hacksaw. That he'd never seen it before. We're lied to all the time. So for him to not be truthful about the hacksaw would not be unusual in the case at all.
The question then is, if he was so careful about disposing of the victim, why leave the most incriminating piece of evidence essentially in plain view in a room only he had access to? It almost seems too convenient.
While the hacksaw is sent off to forensics, detectives fend off a media firestorm.
When you got a crime like that, what are you doing? Do you have any suspects?
We kept calling every day trying to find out new information. So I'm sure the police department felt the pressure. It was definitely the main thing everyone in the community was talking about.
Facing immense pressure to solve Lauren's murder, detectives bring in over 20 members of the police force to help bring her killer to justice.
I think once they found the hacksaw in the laundry room or maintenance room of the development, they knew that it had to be someone who either lived in that development or
in the complex. There's only one person who doesn't willingly consent. Lauren's classmate, Stephen McDaniel.
The way the apartments were set up, there were 2 downstairs apartments and 2 upstairs apartments. And Lauren lived in the apartment upstairs to the left. Stephen lived in the apartment upstairs to the right. So they were kind of next door to each other.
Stephen is a very different person. He seemed a little socially awkward. Some of the conversations he would have with me when I was on site working and that was Stephen.
Suspicious about why Stephen won't voluntarily allow a search of his apartment, investigators question him downtown.
And I remember getting so upset because they were treating Stephen differently.
All right. Just gotta ask you a few more questions.
I remember saying to one of my friends that they're stereotyping.
You stated that you're by helping me. I've asked everyone there, and everyone in the apartment complex has agreed, except you.
It's the lawyer in me, I suppose. I mean, what can I say? I just needed to know.
Just the way that he was acting was suspicious in general to me.
How'd you get this mark down here on the chin?
Place I've been picking at. Problem is this hair right here, right in there. I don't know what it is. It gets infected or ingrown.
So you don't want me looking in your apartment at all?
If you want to look there and see if Lauren is there, I'll walk you through it.
You don't have no problem with that?
No.
Okay.
Investigators went over to the apartment and began searching it. They had noticed in his apartment condoms. And we knew that within speaking with him that he had made some comments about saving himself about these condoms. He spontaneously stated that he had stolen them out of some of the other residences' apartments.
The fact that Stephen confesses to having burglarized apartments in that complex, to me, is a game changer. We know, first of all, that burglary is the most common first crime among both homicidal and non-homicidal sex offenders who are currently incarcerated. It is a gateway crime.
As suspicions deepen around Stephen, investigators pore over several news interviews that he gave the day the
parking lot area. I know they've been doing a lot of, I think that's where they have recovered the body or whatever they recovered from there.
Body?
Had you seen anything there? Had you seen anything there? I mean, we don't know if this is the same person. You know what I mean? Like, they took out a body there earlier. We don't know if it's the same person or not. So that's how we're trying to ask people if they know who lived there. Are you okay, sir?
I think I need to sit down.
Okay.
When I saw the way that he acted when he found out that there was a body in that trash can, without a shadow of a doubt, it's right there in front of your face.
But not everybody believes Stephen is guilty.
The Stephen that I had met could never have done this. And I didn't believe it for a minute.
Stephen McDaniel has confessed to burglarizing his neighbors, leading detectives to wonder whether he was the stalker who murdered.
Subsequently arrested on that burglary and held until we were able to possibly get enough evidence to prove murder. With Stephen in custody, investigators obtained a search warrant for Stephen's apartment, where a more detailed search at that time was conducted. And during that search, they located a pair of panties.
So in my mind as a psychologist, I'm thinking, what is Stephen's fantasy life? What is he thinking about? What is sexually arousing?
And the underwear to forensics for DNA analysis. Meanwhile, they make a startling find in Stephen's apartment.
I guess it was the second or third day, and I arrived at the apartments, and they called me over. One of the detectives called me over, and he said, "Do you recognize this?" I recognized it, and I said, "It's a master key. Where did you get it?" And he said, "It came out of Stephen's apartment." And I was absolutely devastated. I was feeling like, oh my God, am I the one that lost his key?
One key.
There were 2 keys that were found in the apartment. One was a pass key. There was another key found that was actually a key that fit the lock to Lauren Giddings' apartment.
Armed with this incriminating evidence, detectives interrogate Stephen McDaniel for the second time that evening.
What's wrong? You know Detective Patterson, right?
Yes.
Do you remember? Put your hands up here. You remember us talking earlier tonight? Right?
Yes.
The first thing hurt Lauren. He doesn't say anything. Stephen just kind of puts his hands up on the table in the interview room and just kind of stares off into space.
Look, just tell me what happened, brother.
I don't know.
Well, where's she at? I need you, I'm asking you for your help.
I don't know.
I need you to tell me what you want me to tell her mother.
I don't know.
Do you need to see what you told the media? I want to know.
I don't know where she is.
I don't think it was a desperation move on his part. Stephen, at that point, he probably knew that he'd been had, or that the gig was up, and he didn't know where to go from there.
Where were you at yesterday?
At home.
What'd you do at home? Tell me everything you did yesterday. From the time you woke up to the time you went to sleep.
I don't know.
Steven, you gonna look at this right here, this little girl right here?
I don't know.
Yes, you know. You did something stupid, and I believe you feel bad about it, and that's why you're all freaked out right now.
Detectives interrogate Stephen for 3 hours, trying to get him to confess, but they get nowhere.
In Stephen's case, the fact that he clams up, lawyers up, whatever term you want to use, and essentially doesn't want to speak to investigators or confess, the joke is that his browser history does the confessing for him.
On his computer, we located websites of sadomasochism. We also located where he had looked up on how to get away with murder. We also found where he had looked up on how to dismember a body.
I think what we see with Stephen is somebody who may have begun by thinking about Lauren, looking at certain materials online, and the more he looks at this, the more aroused he becomes, and he resorts to more intrusive kind of activities. So he starts taking pieces of clothing from her, letting himself into her apartment, using, if you will, in more and more intrusive ways, to the point where perhaps this was what we would refer to as a lust murder. where he, is pairing his sexual arousal with cruelty.
Working to build a solid case against Stephen McDaniel, detectives are digging for irrefutable evidence to charge him with the murder of Lauren Giddings.
Everyone thought he did it. There were search warrants executed at his apartment almost every day for weeks. They just kept pulling out stuff out of his apartment.
What they find is a cornucopia of weaponry, handguns, a semi-automatic rifle, an entire collection of knives, and even a samurai sword. But the most damning of all,
the packaging from the hacksaw was found in his apartment. And the packaging matched the hacksaw that was located in the maintenance room, in the fire hall. And I think his problem was that he thought that he was smarter than we were. But I will tell you this, in my career as being an investigator and investigating homicides, he is the only one that I've ever known of to be stupid enough to get on camera and speak about a murder that he's actually the one that committed. At that point, we believe we had enough circumstantial evidence to present it to the district attorney's office for the go-ahead on Stephen being charged with the murder of Lauren Giddings.
Another piece of the puzzle.
Electronic equipment was also taken from Stephen's house, and there was also some videos found. One of those videos showed Stephen holding a pole up to Lauren's window and looking in.
There was a timestamp on that. June 25th at 11:10 that night.
The video in itself was very creepy. The fact that someone is in the privacy of their own home and has a camera pointed into your window watching your every move. Once that was presented to Stephen and his attorney, that's what led to Stephen confessing and taking a plea.
Based on Stephen McDaniel's written confession, detectives can now reconstruct the final 24 hours of Lauren Giddings' life.
On that Friday night, Lauren, Ashley, and Joe had went to a bar downtown. They'd had a few drinks. Afterwards, they went back to Joe's apartment. The next morning, they went to Healy Point Country Club, where she had hung out by the pool and ordered a drink.
June 25th, Saturday, Stephen McDaniel videoed through the window of her apartment around 11:10 p.m. that night. Stephen said he entered into her apartment at around 4:30 a.m. He said he came in the apartment that morning with a mask on. At some point during the struggle, the mask was pulled off. She saw it was him.
He confessed to strangling her to death. He dismembered her in the shower. Stephen did admit to taking the rest of Lauren's body parts and distributing them throughout different trash bins in the neighborhood. We didn't find anything at all. There's only one person that knows where the rest of Lauren is, and that's Stephen McDaniel.
I think that for Stephen The clock ran out. He didn't think that police were gonna find that torso that morning. He was counting on the dumpster coming in and picking up that trash bin and taking it to the landfill. After that, you know, everything was in motion and he didn't have time to catch up.
I believe Stephen's motive was purely lust, murder, all wrapped up into one. For child, for a sociopath. He knew exactly what he was doing. He planned the murder, and then he carried it out. He's the worst kind of killer.
Stephen McDaniel is sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Lauren Giddings.
Initially, they were going to go for the death penalty on this case, but due to the fact that Lauren didn't believe in the death penalty, they did not want to hand it out to Stephen in memory of her.
Detectives believe they may have stopped a serial killer.
Killed once, that it's possible that he could kill again. I don't think that anybody would be safe with him back on the street again.
The fact that they were able to catch Stephen McDaniel and arrest him for the murder, I think brings some relief to the family, but it doesn't change anything. How can you get through something like that? Especially when the last few hours of Lauren's life, they have really no idea what happened or what went through her mind. And then to not be able to give your sister, your child, a proper burial.
That you love taken from you. There's nothing that anyone can do to give you closure, even catching the person who did it. You're scarred forever.
This was something savage. It scared the community.
The heartless murder of a woman restarting her life.
She had at least 10 fractured ribs, fractured larynx, bruises all over her body.
By posing her and making her look like some type of a sexual deviant, she is basically being humiliated after the end of her life.
Forbidden passion leads to the ultimate betrayal.
A sexual relationship. Maybe something went wrong. Or was it some unknown subject that we had in our community that enjoyed doing this?
Everybody is a suspect.
The truth will be revealed.
She was doing some online dating, and whoever killed her is in her computer, and that'll tell you all you need to know.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. Deer Park, Washington, 20 miles north of Spokane. It's a nature lover's paradise.
It is full of fun things to do, both winter and summer. People come here to take their vacations. It's such a nice town. And so we feel lucky to live here.
It's not overly cool.
Deer Park is a quiet place, and it's not known for violent crimes. Maybe property crimes, some family disputes that we deal with.
But on a chilly December evening, the quiet safety of the town would be violently disturbed when police get a call from a distraught man looking for his ex-wife, Shannon Starbuck.
He asked for a deputy to respond to her house to do a welfare check. He explained to the deputy that it was responding deputies walked around the house looked through the windows, looked for signs of forced entry. Is there some kind of foul play here? At the time, they did not have enough probable cause or reasonable suspicion to enter this residence without a warrant.
The next day, police get another call, this time from her panicked mother.
According to her mother, they spoke at 9 a.m. in the morning on a daily basis. And it had been 2 mornings that they had not spoken. To obtain a key, and they made entry at that time and discovered the body.
Detectives Mike Ricketts and Lyle Johnston of the Spokane County Sheriff's Office rushed to the scene.
There was no signs of a break-in. I didn't see anything obvious within the living room. When I entered the master bedroom, here is this white female that's in her mid-30s or so, laying on the bed.
She had bruising near her neck area and some bruising around her facial area. The bruising itself would indicate to me that she was beat. There were no knife wounds. There were no gun wounds. I considered it a possibility that it was suffocation or strangulation. There was a robe that was kind of awkwardly placed on her. There was a massage vibrator type of device that people would use to massage their muscles that was wrapped inside of that robe awkwardly.
Detectives confirm the woman is 42-year-old Shannon Starbuck.
Shannon was a lovely, vivacious woman. She was married to a man named Clay, and they had recently become divorced.
Now, they had 5 children. 2 older boys lived with Clay, and the 3 younger, the 2 girls and the youngest son, lived with Shannon.
She was vibrant. She was beautiful. She was kind. She was also going back to school that time. She was restarting her life.
Who would break into her? This was something savage. It scared the community.
To catch her killer, detectives will need to piece together the last 24 hours of Shannon Starbuck's life. They start by processing the crime scene.
I didn't find any sign of a struggle inside the bedroom. We collected DNA swabs from her neck and under her fingernails. All of the blankets from the bed were inside the wash machine, which was just been completely wiped down. And appears to be some type of cleanup of the crime scene to hide any potential evidence that may have been left on the bed by the suspect. At the foot of the bed is what appears to be a safe. And inside there are several sexual toys that are staged in a way so that they could be obviously seen from anyone who's walking past.
Detectives start working up a profile on Shannon's killer.
By she is basically being humiliated after the end of her life. This would appear to be someone that has some type of a vendetta against Shannon to take this much time and effort to make her look this bad.
Is it somebody that was close to her, that knows her, that was angry with her, wanted to get back at her? Or was it some unknown subject that we had in our community that enjoyed doing this?
The first person detectives want to speak with is Shannon's.
We're going to look at the domestic partner or the ex.
I met Clay And I said, "Hi, I'm Detective Dressback. I understand you have some questions." He said, "Yeah. I want to know what's going on. Nobody will tell me anything." I said, "You don't know what happened?" He said, "No, nobody will tell me anything." So I said, "Well, I'm sorry, but your wife was found dead in her bedroom." And he just collapsed on the floor. And it's prudent and appropriate as an investigator to give them room to react in whatever fashion they're gonna react. Like, this was very traumatic to him.
After Clay gets over the shock of Shannon's death, detectives ask him when he last saw his ex-wife.
Clay Starbuck had told us that he had a small car that didn't run very well. So on the day in question, he starts the car up. He drives it around this community area where he lives in Deer Park. And it stalls approximately 2 to 3 blocks from Shannon Starbuck's house.
And I texted Shannon and said, you know, like, car quit, can you take the kids? And she texted me and said, okay. And so she took the kids to school. So I walk home.
He gets back to his house and then he goes to sleep because his back is hurting. And at that time, his phone must have died because the battery wasn't charged.
Clay says he went back to work on his car from 11:10 a.m. more tools.
2:45 p.m. The children were out of school and texted Shannon asking where she was, who's gonna pick me up.
Shannon was supposed to go to the school and pick up the children, and she doesn't arrive.
In the late afternoon, while his phone was dead, Clay says he missed a number of texts.
3:17 p.m., Shannon texted Clay asking if he could pick up the kids. And that was the last text from her phone.
I just got up. Can you get the kids? But my phone wasn't on. And so Austin left work and picked up the kids.
Clay wasn't worried at that point because he thought he would see Shannon later that night.
There was a basketball game one of the oldest sons was playing in at the high school that evening. And Shannon usually would show up at those games, however, she wasn't there that night.
I sent Shannon a couple texts just saying, you know, get a hold of us. We've walked around the house. I've walked around the house with the kids with a flashlight, looking in there Thursday night.
Okay.
And
And then what happened?
Well, we went back to my house.
Okay.
And the kids kept trying to call Shannon, and I think I sent her another text. On Friday, I sent her a text and said, if we don't hear from you by 7 p.m. tonight, I'm going to call and have the sheriff find you.
Detectives are now able to narrow down the window of time that Shannon was murdered.
After 3:17 p.m. and sometime before December 2nd, around 9 a.m.
She had a routine of talking to her mother at a specific time in the morning, and that phone call doesn't come. So we begin to operate under the assumption that she was deceased by that particular time.
Investigators check Clay's cell phone records. It corroborates what he told investigators.
He was cooperative during the interview, and he provided a DNA sample voluntarily.
Who he thinks might have wanted to hurt Shannon in such a brutal way.
The thing that he kept saying was, look at her computer, and that'll tell you all you need to know. He said she was doing some online dating, and whoever killed her is in there.
Detectives are working a theory that whoever murdered Shannon Starbuck could be connected to her online dating. They start by
First ones that came up was a guy by the name of Tom. And Tom had sent her some text messages that very day. Tom and Shannon had been flirting back and forth, and it was obvious that they're attracted to one another.
As they continue reading the texts, alarm bells sound.
Tom is encouraging Shannon to send him some kind of racy pictures, and one of the pictures that he asked for is very similar to the pose we find Shannon's deceased body in.
Is this a coincidence? How is this possible?
We're thinking he is our suspect.
They track Tom down by calling the number on Shannon's phone.
When we first talked to Tom, we went to his residence. Tom told us he met Shannon through a dating application. They had met, they had communications on the phone and via text. They had not been intimate.
Detectives asked Tom to account for his whereabouts during the time they believe Shannon was murdered.
Tom Walker told us that he left from work approximately 9:40 a.m. He said that he had texted her about going to the funeral and asked her how her day was going. She subsequently responded to him a little while later, around 12, asking if he would like to meet her for lunch at that time. She thought it was odd because she knew that he had a funeral to attend to and that he would be at work and would not be able to meet on December 1st. We were able to investigate that and totally corroborate everything he told us. His boss eliminated him by verifying when he was at work, when he went to Shannon's residence on December 1st. Tom also provided us with a DNA sample voluntarily. His DNA was not found on Shannon Starbuck in the place of the injuries.
So we were able to rule Tom out in the death of Shannon Starbuck.
Still believing Shannon's dating history is the key to finding her killer, detectives delve deeper into her personal life.
Similar to going to a bar, for instance, to meet people and not knowing them. Online, you're also potentially connecting with people you don't know, associated with increased risk of violence.
So sometime shortly after noon, Shannon text messages the guy by the name of John and appears to be setting up some type of a rendezvous for later in the evening, on the same day as her death.
Detectives set to work finding John Wilson.
We were able to take the photograph off of John's Facebook account, run it through the open source search engine, and we were able to match that photograph with a doctor out of Maryland. And John is just an unknown person who's faking these profiles for the purposes of dating multiple women.
I think 50% of people or more report lying about their profiles or information online. So it begs the question, who are you talking to?
John's fake online persona leads detectives to theorize that he is somehow involved in Shannon's murder.
He's difficult to find, and he's already being untruthful about his identity. He seems to have disappeared into the one is our guy because he is being so secretive. He's being so careful to cover his tracks. We reached out to John directly. I sent him both an email and messaged him saying, you need to contact the police. So when John calls me, he is very skeptical. Sounds like he can't really believe the police are reaching out to him. But I inform him that I'm investigating the death of Shannon Starbuck. His first reaction was that he wanted to consult with an attorney.
When you see a suspect, immediately alert to them having something to hide.
Detectives ask for the man's real name, but he refuses to give it to them.
And at that time, I scribbled out a quick note saying, hey, tell him he's got 20 seconds, tell us who he is, identify himself, or we're going to put his photograph out on the media everywhere to find out who he is.
It's called offering the out. And this is frequently where we see they'll cop to something that they wouldn't normally confess to because it's a preferred alternative to what's being insinuated.
And we make an arrangement to meet the following day with his attorney.
Detectives finally come face to face with their prime suspect, John Kenline.
And so John did lay out the fact that he is married, he has a job that is kind of respected in the community, and yet he's leading this double lifestyle of meeting up with multiple women. And so he doesn't want this to be known. He feels that he's got a lot to lose, is riding on the line. Yet at the same time, he realizes the predicament he's in. He's the #1 suspect in a homicide, so it all has to come out.
If somebody's willing to cheat or lie to their family, they're probably willing to lie to investigators.
Detectives asked John where he was during the time they believe Shannon was murdered.
He told us that he dropped his kids off at school that morning and that he had plans to see Shannon approximately 10:30 a.m. in Deer Park.
He admits that he's been there at the house. He's made phone calls on the day that she is murdered. Everything puts him in the area.
Detectives suspect John Kenline knows more than he's letting on.
What crossed my mind was maybe they did meet up and maybe they did have a sexual relationship. Maybe something went wrong. We suspected that John was our killer.
As the prime suspect in the murder of Shannon Starbuck.
John told us he drove up to Shannon's house and there was no answer. So he utilized some public phones in the Deer Park area. And he tried to call her, still didn't get any answer. He actually drove back to her house, still no sign of Shannon. Nobody answered the door. He also went around the house knocking on windows and that. There was still no answer.
After he left, Kenline claims he finally heard from Shannon. She texted saying she was out for lunch and was sorry.
And appears to be setting up some type of a rendezvous for later in the evening, making plans for that night.
So John went back that evening and tried to meet up with her, and there was no answer.
Detectives are suspicious of John's story.
His own alibi put him at the house during that time frame when Shannon was murdered.
There could be a variety of motivations that John would have in showing up at her house. It could be that she was about to expose him for the shark ghosted him, and how dare she. It could be that he just wanted to take the relationship to the next level and then found when he was there that, in fact, his fantasies were more twisted maybe than even he knew.
There's just one problem.
At the time, John did provide us with a DNA sample, which we tested along with other samples, and he was eliminated as a contributor to DNA.
The fact John's DNA is ruled out doesn't necessarily mean he's not the killer. Every alibi should be independently corroborated through some secondary.
He's just not admitting to having been in the house or having direct contact with her. We still had a lot of investigation to do before we could rule him out.
With John stonewalling them, the investigation hits a wall.
I think it did shock the people of Deer Park as well as the Spokane community. A mother of 5 children murdered inside her own home. No apparent signs of forced entry. Did she answer the door and someone forced her way in? That type of incident without answers scares people.
Streets for the community at large. And that was very stressful for me at the time because I didn't want to miss anything. I wanted to make sure we covered all of our bases and that we were headed in the right direction.
But soon, their hard work pays off.
We always request records directly from the cell phone provider. And in this case, when I was able to get records for Shannon Starbuck's phone, I was able to go through them and I found some cell phones actually mask 911 calls, and that would be if you were a victim and you called 911, as soon as you hang up, the suspect wouldn't be able to grab your phone and see that you had called. So it's kind of a safety feature.
The discovery of the 911 call rocks the investigation.
And I can actually remember standing up at my desk and announcing to all the other detectives in the room, she called 911, and it was extremely exciting. We're working on the premise that Shannon died some timestamps 9:17 in the morning as the time that this event is taking place. We're able to verify that with 911. And it was an oh my gosh moment of, we really know when this happened now.
To me and the other investigators, that indicated that that was the time she was attacked.
911, what are you reporting?
And she was killed shortly thereafter.
Hello?
Investigators, and hearing this for the first time, I mean, this was under their noses all along. She was essentially in the throes of death.
Detectives have learned that Shannon Starbuck called 911 in distress in the early morning of December 1st, the day she was killed.
So we were unaware up until weeks into the investigation that she had ever called 911. But once we have them pull the records for that specific date and time, and they found a recording that they didn't know existed.
911, what are you reporting?
When you listen to the recording, you can hear a grunt and a muffled noise in the background that sounds like someone possibly being assaulted.
911, what are you reporting? Hello?
It was eerie in the sense that you knew this is a struggle that's going on. 911 receiver actually talks at the exact same time that that noise is in the background.
911, what are you reporting?
And it would be my belief that he probably talked over it and didn't realize that there was anyone on the end. He did call the phone number immediately back, but there was no answer. It goes to voicemail because the phone has been shut off or disabled by this time.
Hi, this is Shannon. Please leave a message.
And therefore, there is no
calls or at least a one-officer dispatch.
Would it necessarily have stopped what was occurring? Not likely, but maybe perhaps her killer could have been found much earlier.
The discovery of the 911 call sends the investigation into a whole new direction.
Initially, it appeared that Shannon was most likely alive in the afternoon of December 1st. She's texting to multiple people, both Tom, John, Clay at some point, and the kids as well.
Detectives now believe it was likely
of possible suspects really starts to slim down because now you can check out their alibis and know whether or not it was possible for them to have been involved or not.
With the new evidence, detectives take another look at their prime suspect, John Kenline.
We discovered that at 9:20, he's taking the kids to school. So to me, that's pretty closely ruling John out as being involved and getting back and forth between those locations with the amount of time it would take to go from Spokane to Deer Park.
This is a case that would be and has been extraordinarily frustrating for investigators in that you have some pretty specific crime scene behaviors and a puzzling scene and a number of viable suspects, and nothing is shaking out. The unanswered questions are going to keep you up at night.
After ruling out John Kenline in the murder of Shannon Starbuck, detectives go back to the drawing board.
We're looking at saying, okay, somebody got on her phone and was communicating with John Kenline, was communicating with Tom Walker, was returning messages.
Discovery.
While I'm talking to the friends of Shannon, they are informing me that Clay has been nothing but trouble for Shannon. He has harassed her, he has done damage to her place, he has done damage to her vehicle, he has threatened her.
He owes her a significant amount of child support. He's a very much controlling person. He's not happy with the fact that she's dating other men, that he has no control over her, and he has been stalking and harassing her for some time.
When it's learned that Clay has been stowed from the research in intimate partner homicides, that when stalking's involved, it increases the risk 2 to 3 times that somebody is going to end up murdered.
We discovered she was so concerned about Clay stalking her, essentially, that she did ask for and receive a domestic violence protection order.
Tragically, the use of restraining orders like we see in this case, I mean, it's a piece of paper. The existence of that paper is actually seen by the offender as a voucher to actually act on what they've already been planning. It actually infuriates and escalates their behavior to the point that it has the opposite of the desired effect.
If she was harmed or killed, that it was Clay Starbuck that had done it to her.
Based on these new revelations, detectives take a second look at Clay Starbuck.
So Clay had given us a story about his vehicle breaking down and how he had sent some text messages to Shannon to try to get her to take the children to school. And that after his car broke down, he went back to his house and fell asleep. Somewhere in there, he said that his cell phone battery died and his cell phone was off for a majority of the day. His phone was actually off for a majority of the day. But when we examine cell phone records frequently, we don't look at just a very small frequent time frame because people live and breathe on their cell phones in this day and age. You develop patterns. So for Clay Starbucks, over a 1-year total of cell phone records were obtained. And what we were able to see was that at no other time over the preceding year has his phone ever been off for the amount of time that it was off on the day that Shannon Starbuck was murdered. He had never, in a timely fashion, or go for periods of time where there was no activity. Yet, on the day of Shannon Starbuck's murder, all of those things happened.
Detectives meet with Clay, testing his alibi against the new timeline.
We ask him to go for a little ride with us to show us the route that he drove and where his vehicle broke down and how he walked back to his house, which he agreed to do. Now, this is a golf course community, and there are actually greens in between some of these residences. And where between these houses, and would have been the most likely direct route to walk back to his house. And in this particular December, there isn't a lot of snow. There wasn't anything really impeding someone from taking that route. But Clay insists that he walked down the sidewalk and stayed off of the golf green, at which point he turns and goes east through the neighborhood back to his own residence. We follow this route, and we specifically look for home security cameras, and we find one. We contact the home footage numerous times. We cannot once find Clay Starbuck walking past this residence that he claims he walked past 4 times on that day. I questioned him on this at least 2 to 3 times. Are you sure this is the route you've taken? And he is adamant that that's the route he's taken. And now, after looking at the footage from the surveillance video, it's obvious that Clay Starbuck isn't being truthful with us about where he was and what he was doing.
Investigation in the murder of Shannon Starbuck to her ex-husband, Clay, when a surprising piece of evidence emerges.
DNA that was identified as belonging to male Starbuck lineage was found in the area where Shannon was strangled and suffocated. So it wasn't DNA just found on a ledge or an item of clothing or something that had been there for a while. This was DNA that was found on Shannon Starbuck, where she was injured, part of the cause of her death.
In order to prove it belongs to him and not one of his sons.
We were able to eliminate the adult male Starbuck children because one of them was at school during that day and the other one was at work. That left us with Clay Starbuck as being the provider of the DNA on Shannon Starbuck.
Closing in on their killer, detectives bring Clay Starbuck down to the station to confront him with the damning evidence.
Clay Starbuck agreed to be interviewed. He waived his rights, so we proceeded with a recorded interview with him.
Part of how we got here today lined up to show that you have not been truthful with us to this point. All of the evidence is lined up to show that you were there at the house on that particular day that Shannon died.
Is that no? I can't hear you. No?
Now, don't sit here and tell me you weren't there, because we have the proof that you were there, okay?
No. I've been in that house probably 30 times.
Okay, it's not about the house.
It's not about the house, and
it's not about the house. How did your DNA?
You see, my DNA was there under her fingernails and around her mouth. I don't have any scratches or bruises. You guys looked at me for that. I didn't do that.
I said, I understand that, Clay, but let me go get something. I went and grabbed the lab report, and I showed it to him. This is the laboratory report that indicates your DNA is under her fingernails was on her neck and on her face.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I just have a problem believing it.
He started breathing heavy. He was almost hyperventilating.
I'm not doing very well right now.
You're not doing very well because you're under arrest for murder. I agree with you. You're not doing very well right now. At that point, he shut down. He didn't make any more statements.
Detectives arrest Clay Starbuck and charge him with the murder of his wife, Shannon.
Sadly, Shannon's fatal mistake was daring to start a new life without Clay. And it really drove him crazy. Clay killed Shannon, I think, because he was jealous. He owed her more than $9,000. And so it appears that Clay decided that he could get out of these financial problems by simply killing her.
Detectives now believe they know what happened to Shannon Starbuck in the last hours of her life.
December 1st, around 8 a.m., Clay text messages Shannon, asks her to take the children to school. Most likely during the time frame that she's away from the house, taking the children to school, Clay has snuck into the house.
While Clay is waiting for Shannon to return home, he turns off his cell phone.
Shortly after getting back to the house, he attacks her. She attempts to call 911, but that call is cut short.
911, what are you reporting?
And her phone is turned off, and then he murders her through a struggle, strangulation. He positions the community to be aware of after the fact and makes her look like the bad person because she's doing some online dating and things that he doesn't necessarily approve of.
After she was attacked, I believe Clay got on her phone and on her computer and started looking through it and communicating back with these individuals, trying to frame either Tom Walker or John Kenline as being the ones that committed the murder.
Clay then returns home, turns on his cell phone, and waits for his kids to get home from school.
Murder, but at the same time, he was able to keep things under control and keep his behavior premeditated and organized enough that he uses these texts to artificially engineer this alibi.
Detectives also believe that Clay texted himself from Shannon's cell phone to fool police into thinking she was still alive for most of the day on December 1st.
For me, I also wonder, is there an element of sadism here? Is there a deeper quality to him that really wants to have Shannon experience pain and suffering?
In prison, without the possibility of parole.
Clay definitely planned this out. There was a significant amount of premeditation, and I think that someone that can be that calculating and that terrible to any other human being, spending the rest of his life in prison is definitely what he deserved.
It's horrendous, but not just because of what happened to Shannon. It's what it did to this family. When Clay Starbuck killed Shannon, he robbed their children of their mother. It was a selfish act based in greed and jealousy, and it just didn't have to happen.